Canada is about to spend nearly $18 billion on new military helicopters. That sounds like a big announcement. But here's what we don't hear all over the place. We're not buying just one helicopter. We're rebuilding an entire aviation doctrine that collapsed more than 30 years ago. And if you understand what went wrong back then, you'll understand why this new plan is so risky and why it might also be unavoidable. Today, we're going to break down what Canada is actually buying, why this plan exists at all, how we got into this mess, what the new fleet might look like, why delivery timelines stretch into the 2030s, and what this means for Canada's military credibility. This isn't just a procurement story. It's a story about decisions made decades ago and the price we're still paying today. Welcome to North America. I'm your host, Pierre Shields. Let's dive in. The new helicopter plan. Last week, reporting confirmed that the Canadian Armed Forces plan to spend roughly $18 billion on a new generation of helicopters. But this isn't a single aircraft replacement. The plan, known internally as the Next Tactical Aviation Capability Set, or nTACS, envisions 4 distinct helicopter types, including Special Operations Helicopters, Attack or Armed Reconnaissance Helicopters, Medium Lift Tactical Helicopters, and Continued Heavy Lift Support via Chinooks. This would represent the largest restructuring of Canada's rotary wing forces since the Cold War. Really, it's not an exaggeration. The goal is to create a balanced helicopter force where different aircraft do different jobs instead of forcing one airframe to do everything poorly. If that sounds familiar, it should, because Canada has tried this experiment before. How Canada broke its own helicopter fleet. To understand why this matters, we need to go back to the early 1990s. At the end of the Cold War, Canada operated heavy lift Chinooks, light reconnaissance helicopters, and utility helicopters for transport and support. It was a balanced system. But after the Soviet Union collapsed, Ottawa decided helicopters were no longer strategically important. The logic at the time was, large-scale war is over. We don't need heavy lift or specialized platforms anymore. So Canada got rid of its Chinooks, retired reconnaissance helicopters, and replaced everything with one aircraft, the CH-146 Griffin. The idea was simple, one helicopter to do everything. In practice, it was a disaster. Though the CH-146 Griffin's a great helicopter. Afghanistan exposed everything. When Canada deployed to Afghanistan, reality hit hard. The battlefield wasn't roads, it wasn't armored vehicles, it was vertical terrain. Supply lines depended on helicopters. And Canada didn't have any heavy lift aircraft left. So what happened? Canadian troops had to rely on Dutch Chinooks, the same aircraft Canada had given away years earlier. Yeah, let that sink in. At one point, Canadian forces were borrowing helicopters that used to belong to Canada. To compensate, Griffins were hastily modified into makeshift gunships, a role they were never designed for. Later, Canada rushed to buy used Chinooks from the US, then eventually purchased new CH-147 Chinooks. Good. But by the time those arrived, the Afghanistan mission was essentially over. And once again, Ottawa shelved the idea of a balanced fleet. Why the old approach failed. Here's the core problem. Canada tried to save money by using one helicopter for every mission. But modern military operations don't work that way. You need heavy lift, light reconnaissance, armed escort, special operations platforms, and logistics support. Each role has different performance requirements. The Griffin was asked to do everything and ended up doing none of it particularly well. Again, good machine, just doesn't do everything. That's why the military is now going back to the multi-fleet model. Not because it's fancy, because it's unavoidable. What the new plan actually looks like. According to current planning, Canada's future helicopter force would include special operations helicopters, optimized for night operations, insertion and extraction, and high-threat environments. These will likely be the first aircraft delivered, starting around 2033. Yeah, it's far away, but oof. Number 2, attack reconnaissance helicopters. This is the most significant change. Canada has never maintained a true attack helicopter fleet. This capability would provide escort for transport aircraft, close air support, and battlefield awareness. This is a major shift in doctrine. Number 3, medium lift tactical helicopters. These replace the Griffin's core mission, troop transport, medevacs, logistics, and domestic response. These aircraft will form the backbone of the future force. Number 4, heavy lift. So Canada will continue operating its CH-147 Chinooks for heavy transport, Arctic operations, and disaster response. Why nothing has been selected yet? Yeah, you might find this confusing, but despite all this planning, no helicopter has been selected yet. It's not a failure, it's deliberate. The government is studying multiple aircraft types, consulting industry, avoiding another one size fits all mistake, and trying to balance cost, capability, and politics. They're also spacing deliveries far into the future. Special operations aircraft around 2033, main fleet not until 2038, and fully operational capability likely closer to 2040. Sounds slow, and it is, but it reflects how complex modern military aviation has become. What this means for Canada. This isn't just a military decision. It affects, number one, Arctic sovereignty. Helicopters are essential for northern patrols, search and rescue, surveillance, and rapid deployment. You can't assert Arctic presence without air mobility. Number two, emergency response, floods, fires, evacuations. These helicopters will be used at home far more than overseas. Number three, Canadian industry. Maintenance, upgrades, and training will create long-term jobs, aerospace expertise, and domestic sustainment capacity. If done correctly, this program strengthens Canada's industrial base. If done poorly, it becomes another documentary on CBC, an expensive cautionary tale, and so on, and people are blamed, but nobody's really accountable. Okay, the real risk. Here's the crappy truth. Canada's trying to fix 30 years of underinvestment without admitting that's what happened. The danger isn't picking the wrong helicopter. The danger is delays, political interference, budget cuts, and loss of momentum. Because if this program stalls, Canada will be stuck flying aircraft designed in the 1980s well into the 2040s. Please, Lord, not again. And that's not a serious position for a G7 country. Final takeaway. So here's the bottom line. Canada is finally rebuilding its helicopter force the right way. Slowly, deliberately, and with hard lessons learned. But the clock is ticking. This program will define Canada's military aviation capability for the next 40 years. And whether it succeeds depends on one thing, whether Canada follows through. If you want clear Canada First analysis without the noise, subscribe to North of MAGA, like and share if you value real defense discussion, comment below. Should Canada speed this up or take the time to get it right? Thanks for spending time with me. I'm Pierre Shields from North of MAGA. Go play outside.